on the bill. I listened very carefully, and I double-checked with my colleague, Senator Roback, as to characterizations and direct comments and statements made by Senator Liz Krueger, and she was talking about the revenues in this budget, in particular the PIT, and how it was going to work and where the money was going to go. And she specifically said that the City of New York is a donor to upstate New York to the tune of $13 billion. Then she went on to say that the money that's generated from this doesn't benefit Long Island and doesn't benefit New York City, but benefits upstate New York. Now, as a Long Islander, someone representing communities all across the 2nd Senate District, I'm concerned, I'm frustrated, I'm frankly appalled that a characterization like that would be made by the Vice Chair of the Senate Finance Committee, so I'll only have to assume that there's some type of callous disregard for the communities on Long Island, because after all, if we're going to raise revenue, there should be some fair and equitable distribution. That's number one. Number two, following up on conversations that I know Senator DeFrancisco had, and I did as well, in talking to Senator Carl Krueger, we asked questions about general fund spending. And Senator Krueger told me he would get back to me. And Senator Liz Krueger, couldn't answer the question today as well. So it is perplexing for me, and I think for many of us, including the public, to listen to characterizations by the majority that general fund spending is only up 1%, and yet no one can provide us with any numbers. There are no numbers from DOB. There are no updated numbers from the financial plan. There is nothing that we can represent, not only in terms of general fund spending, but in state fund spending. There is absolutely no specificity. And I go back to the financial plan that was presented to us the other day with both Senator Krueger and Senator Krueger on the cover of this. The all funds number is there, but not the general fund number and not the state fund number. So I am left to assume that we don't have that information, and yet we're listening to characterizations that general fund spending is only up 1%. We don't know that factually, but those who are advocating for this budget keep making those statements. And then finally, I want to go back to something that Senator DeFrancisco said relative to page 319 of the Public Protection and General Government budget, and this is something that I will partially agree with the majority on. The first part of this language is language to the tune of $1 billion, hereby being appropriated for transfer by the governor to funds established in a specific account. We have done that in the past. I readily acknowledge that, and that in this respect right now is a dry appropriation. But in working with our own finance people who negotiated some prior budgets, the second paragraph is the most glaring example of where I think we're going to have problems and where I think the most politics is going to get played with this budget. A fair interpretation of what this statute says right here is that $1 billion can be put into this special fund. And now, unlike in the past, there is unfettered discretion and authority on the part of the division of the budget, obviously in conjunction with the governor, to spend that money as they see fit. And it says specifically, to any state department, agency, or public authority for the purposes in the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009. There is no oversight by the legislature. There is no specific authority where the legislature is allowed to provide input. This is at the sole discretion of the division of the budget. Now, the division of the budget is the organization, the entity here right now that's holding up capital projects, that's holding up other projects that affect all of our communities and all of our separate Senate districts. This is the ultimate member item, except it doesn't go out to the communities that we represent. It's in the authority and discretion of the division of the budget. And I think we should be able to tell people that so they know when these issues come up, well, how did that press release, that money, that new money's going out the door and somehow it's going into one portion of the state but not to another? This is exactly what is wrong with this budget. Because, and I don't offer this disrespectfully, I listened to Senator Liz Krueger say there was $7 billion in federal stimulus funds. I listened to Senator Carl Krueger the other night make a representation of $5 billion. Then I looked at some press releases that said $7.2 billion. Then I heard Senator Krueger say $1.3 billion that goes back to last year. So if we're standing here, my thinking is it's 7 plus the 1.3, that's 8.3 billion. And there were representations made that there's a total of $24 billion in this package. So are we to assume that over the course of the next year, we're going to spend the other $15.7 billion? And then I think to myself, all right, if we have $24 billion and we're spending approximately $8 billion, why shouldn't we be using another $4 billion this year to get rid of some of these onerous taxes that are contained in this budget? Why are we putting most of the money into next year when our need is the most glaring right now? The problem is that no one can provide a satisfactory answer, and I'll close on this point. Looking at this financial plan, I will give the majority credit for this. You have provided great clarity and great detail on all the taxes and fees that you want to impose upon the residents of New York. There's no speculation, it's right there. However, there's no plan as to how the federal stimulus money will be spent. There's no document, even right now, that we can all look at. Any one of us, not me, not the Republicans, any one of us in the Senate doesn't know where the money is going. In fact, we don't even know how much money we have. And on top of that, we don't even know what the governor has applied for, supposedly on behalf of the residents of the state of New York. This fund was referred to the other night as a slush fund. I'll say it a little differently. It's the ultimate member item fund, except it doesn't affect any of the members that serve in this chamber. It's there for the division of the budget, and frankly, I'm worried that I'm not going to see any money coming to Long Island, no matter whose district we're talking about, because Senator Kruger just said, with all the revenues we have coming in, the money's not going to Long Island, and it's not going to the city of New York, it's going upstate. And I know, and I believe my colleagues in upstate New York need help. But like everybody else, we should have a fair and equitable distribution, and we should be able to see now a blueprint of what that is, so that we can go home to our taxpayers and say, here's where the money came from, and here's where it's going to be spent. That we can't tell them.